Well, welcome everyone to the first MQ session, session 1AB for your feedback form. And please post questions via the chat room and be up to Dom when he wants to respond to them. So without further ado, it's over to you.
Hi, thanks, Melvin. Hi, so my name's Dominic Story. I've worked for IBM now for about 25 years. I worked on MQ in the late 90s, and then I moved into integration around about 1999. And so I've worked on the integration products all the way through to now, really, in 2021. In that time, I've worked on the healthcare pack, manufacturing packs, pattern authoring, and Message Broker Explorer. So lots and lots of different parts from the runtime to the administration part of the ACE product. And so the presentation today, I'm going to go through our App Connect Designer, so an overview of our App Connect Designer offering with various dive-ins, so going over JSON Arta, a bit of how we do flow testing in the App Connect Designer, mapping assist, and then a demo, so a brief sort of 5-10 minute demo of App Connect Designer. And then I'll go through some of the new V12 ACE that's just been released over the past few months. So we've just released 12.0.2.0. So I'll go through some of the new look and feel there, and show you the ACE dashboard and how we're doing a lot more work in the unit testing, and also the source to server and migration aspects. Source to server is interesting because that's all how you can take your flow source and then build it into an image that you can deploy in a Docker container if you want to, or could go straight into your on-prem VM, for example. Okay, right. So this is our designer. So what you can see here is when you install our operator locally. Actually, I'll take a step back. There. So App Connect Designer is something that you can use in several places. You can either deploy it on your on-premise, so on your own servers. So this is where you've maybe got AWS or you've got Azure, and then you've put Red Hat on top. And then on top of that, you can install what's called our operator, which is the IBM App Connect operator. And inside that operator then gives you the ability to be able to create designer authoring instances or dashboards or integration servers. So these are all things that you can run within the Red Hat system, and they all fire up as pods, and you can interact with the web UIs that we create to be able to create new resources like integration servers, for example. So I'll show a brief demo of that later. And so the designer is what you can see in the bottom right here, and it enables you to create flows effectively. So what do we have? So designer effectively is a big bunch of connectors, and then the ability to write flows using those connectors. So what is a connector? So a connector, for example, could connect you to Amazon S3 storage, or Workday or Salesforce, for example, any of these here. So we have lots and lots of connectors that you have the ability to be able to have accounts associated with, and then you can be able to retrieve data from those sources. And then you can write a flow that can process that data. And the outside of these flows are the APIs. So when we build these up, we effectively build up an API. So you can see here, we have requests coming in. We have several connectors, which can be complex if-then loops, looking at parts of the message that are flowing through the system. So every single part of the system, you can interrogate effectively the message tree that's coming through, and then the response. So what do you want to respond back to that API call? Does it just want to be a success? You've taken a lot of transactions in, you've done lots of work, say batch on Salesforce, and then you've responded, yep, I've done that, I've processed 20 records. You can do that sort of thing. It's based on the CRUD system. So basically, your create for post calls, delete calls for D, and get and put for R and U. And you can build them up here. So this is where you can see the operations here. This is the first one here is like a get that you can see. Then you've got a post, and you can create or update, and then you've got the update one there. And each one of these can be its own individual flow. So you can have several gets, several puts, whatever you want. Once you've created all of this as well, you can export them as bar files and run them in ACE. So underneath all of this, we're running ACE. So that's, our core runtime engine is still there, and that's what we still run everything on top of. Okay, right. Oops. Let's go on. Okay. So another thing that you get with these flows running, so you're running all of these flows with all of your connectors, all on the designer authoring, or within the designer authoring. One of the things that you can see are Grafana metrics and Kibana logging. So this is something that comes built into the Red Hat framework. So you can see here I've got a database running, and it's had 2 message flow invocations, and we can see when they happened. And also you get log messages that you can also output from your flow. So you can now put all these log messages into the Kibana space here too. So you can basically see everything that's going on in your system. If you've got 100 ACE servers running, you can see them all running. 100 designer flows running, you can see them all running. Okay, so once you've created your flow, what can you do with it? What does it enable you to do? So part of what we can do is parsing JSON. So that's built in. So an example here, this is a very basic scheduler start point here. So basically a scheduler event is something that can happen every minute, every 10 minutes, whatever time you want. That will fire a message down here. And the JSON parser here can then parse the JSON. So to use the JSON parser, you just give it a small example piece of JSON that you want to work on, and it will generate a JSON schema for you, and then allow you subsequent nodes in the tree, or subsequent connectors in the tree, in the flow, sorry, will allow you to then take out pieces of the message. So for example, here you can see we've taken the whole of the parse JSON and output that there. And then we've just taken out the element name. So the element name, which would be this here, the ship2 name, which has been pulled out. And you can see in a drop down there, you'll be able to get to that element and to use that element. And then we slack it out. So it's the way that with ACE, you have XML as your sort of backend tree. With designer and designer authoring, you have JSON. Okay. Then, oops. Oops, sorry, wait a second. I'm having trouble making the slides move on. There we go. Right, but we can also parse an XML. So here, for example, we have an XML message coming in. Again, you can provide it with an example input, and then it will give you a JSON schema. It will generate a JSON schema under the covers for you and enable you to be able to take XML and then parse it into JSON, which you can then use. And we also have similar functionality for CSV as well. So you can have CSV comma separated values within a table, and you can use them as well in a similar format. Everything boils down to that JSON parser. So once you have all of this information in JSON within your flow, we realized that we needed a powerful mapping language to be able to get values out and to be able to work with values. So that mapping language we created was called JSONata. It was inspired by XPath 3.1. It's a sophisticated, query language. There was nothing out there, and so it was Andy Coleman and Matt Bailey who decided, we're going to need to create our own JSON parsing functionality. So it gives you these functions, so you can see, does this JSON string contain something that would return true? It's very useful in the way that it gives you the help. It's all very integrated. you hit it by hitting this FX here, this function key. Right, so this was the challenge that the team had. So they needed a graphical data mapper to extract and transform the data. So not just pull values out, but also to generate new values and new structures. So graphical mappers required an expression language to manipulate the data. So we wanted something similar to like an Excel style sheet expression that you could just sort of drop in here and it would work. So it's similar to XPath and simple to learn. It also had to run within a browser so that you could test within your browser environment as well as on the server. So running as Node.js. It's a declarative language. So there's this great JSONarter.org demo environment that you can get to. So if you just go to try.jsonarter.org, you can drop in any amount of JSON that you want in here to the left, and then you can put your expressions in. So just to break this one down, you can see that this is going to take the account order product. So if we drop down to account order product, and then it's going to take the price and quantity. So these two pieces here, and it's going to take them, multiply them for every single element in that array. It's going to sum them up. So you can see the result here, 336. So obviously there's several more that go down here, and it would multiply them all together and sum them all up. Now it's a Turing complete language, and so basically there's no limit to the complexity. You know, this JSON here could be, you know, a gigabyte inside. It could be absolutely massive. As long as you've got enough memory to be able to handle it, it will do it. It will work. It'll, you know, unravel itself. Because it's, you know, it's a functional style of language, like a Lisp, and so it will go through, parse it all, give you the answer. And there's always an answer. There has to be an answer. So there has to be an answer that pops out the other end, like a true or a false or a string concatenation or something like that. So it's hosted on GitHub. Anybody can download this and start to extend it. It's being used. It's got a very active community. So we've got 131 forks there at the moment. I looked up this data last night just to make sure it was accurate. And it's currently being used by 7,500 individuals here. So the first two people here are Andy Coleman and Matt Bailey. So they're both within our team. We work with them. I actually work with Matt on a daily basis. He's in my very close team at the moment. And they are still keeping the community going, even though they're doing other work as well. Obviously, they're keeping this community going. And so in IBM App Connect, it's our first class graphical data mapper. It's what we use for everything, but other products also use it, like Node-RED, Watson IoT, Elastic.io. So lots of our competitors have also picked up on this technology and are also using it. There's Stack Overflow. So, you know, people have problems, they can go to Stack Overflow to find out how to use it. And there's a Golang port as well. So it doesn't just work for JavaScript or JSON. There's a Golang port that's been completed and a Java port that's been completed. And this is by other parts of the community. They've taken the language itself, and then they've written it in Go and Java. And there's also a TypeScript as well, but that's experimental and it's sort of built on top of the JSONarter one anyway. So it's got a growing user base, lots of new features getting added. So date time parsing formatting's recently been added, and binary data parsing and processing. So people keep adding parts, but the idea is that it stays very, very small. I think the footprint is less than a meg for the whole of the JSONarter language, because it's, again, very sort of Lisp-like, very functional. It's very, very, very small. And it has a debugger as well. You can debug there. So that's, you know, that's the future of that language. Right, okay, so just jumping back into the flows again of how we write the flows in App Connect Designer. So we have the ability to test right within the flow. So you can hit this edit button here and edit any parameter that would come in, say, from the right of the flow, and then you can test it by hitting that button there, which would then use any accounts that you have set up and fire the message off. So I'll show a demo of this in a bit. But what this one here is doing is basically testing that a message, which is this is some test input, is being sent to a Slack channel. And so then there you go. It says this is some test input that's come through there just by hitting the test button. It's actually live testing the individual parts. So if you ever have a problem with your flow, you can dive straight in and see. And these are very, very simple flows that I keep showing here. There are much, much more complex ones that you can create. Another piece that we've added recently is Mapping Assist. So when putting some of the transformations together and some of the mappings together, it can be quite difficult to sort of figure out which mappings you'd want to use. So we have this new technology called Mapping Assist that runs in its own pod. It effectively looks at all of your flows and uses an AI capability of figuring out, what are you likely to want to put into this field? What's the suggested mapping? And it gives you a percentage here of, you're most likely going to want to put business phone in from the Salesforce message that's coming in into this business phone. I mean, that's a very simplistic one-on-one, but if more and more people started to put mobile phone into there, this mobile phone one would pop up to the top, and that would be the suggested mapping for that field from the previous flows. Right. Okay, so I've now got a demo, so I'll just drop out of the presentation and just show you a demo. Oh yeah, before that, I'll just briefly show you the connectors here. So this is a small view of some of the connectors that we have. So they're all on the website here. So if I jump in here, so I'll just show you the connectors here as well. So this is actually running on Red Hat OpenShift at the moment. So this is my system here that's running. And these are the applications that are available to you. So when you build up your flows, so you can see there's a lot of them there. And then if you jump into one, say for example, Maximo, you can see there's lots and lots of things that you can do within these. So once you've created an account and connected it to your Maximo cloud, you can then create, retrieve assets, create assets, and so on, all built into this flow language. Right, so jump into the dashboard. So I've got a flow here. So I've got a weather station in the back garden. So here's my weather station. So this is live. So currently, the temperature is 10 degrees, though last night it got very, very cold. So it was down at freezing, but it's now a lot warmer. So what that weather station has, if I just stop this flow from running and then dive in. So the weather station has got a HTTP endpoint that you can hit. And so you can see here that I've created a retrieve, a get flow for the Stoke Park weather. You can add, replace, post. These are all the other CRUD things that you can do. So if I wanted to, I could do a post there. Then I'd need to implement that flow, but I'll get rid of that for now. So if we jump in here and edit this flow. So again, this is quite a basic one. So we have the request come in. This is going to invoke this target here with a token. I can try this dynamically. So this will now call my weather station. It's got a 200 back, and we can see the response body there. So it's got success, and we can see other values that are coming in there. So what the temperature is and so on. And now if I start this flow up, if I go back to the dashboard, I can then start this flow up. So this is now live and accessible to the world. And if I jump into the flow, I can now test it from an outside point of view as well, so a dynamic point of view. So if we go in here, we can see here's the endpoint here. This is all Open API. You can export all of this as Open API. So here I can now try this. So we have a username and a password, basic auth, which is set up just for this ACE server, just for this flow. I can hit it with any ID. There was the request that got sent, and the Stoke Parkwood weather, and then here was the response back. So you can see temperature's 10.3 there. And if we jump in here and go back to the grid, it's 10.3. So it's live data coming back from that weather station. And that is exposed. So I mean, if I was to go, if I was now to jump inside here, just very quickly, I can show. If we go into App Connect and then go into the designer authoring, this is the designer authoring that's been created as part of the in the Red Hat OpenShift environment, which the operators created. If I jump into the pod, I can see the designer authoring. Ooh, where is it? Integration server. It should be an IS in here. So these are all the pods that are effectively running that system. There it is. So this is running my ACE. So you can see it's running 1202 production level. And this is firing up. Maybe so you can see the 1050, so that's the time now. Yeah, so we can see I've got some errors because I've not set up the flow particularly well, but the bar file's been deployed. So under the covers, when we're stopping and starting that flow, we're creating a bar file and then sending the bar file down to this integration server, all fully dynamically, and then that is running, and you can see it's there. It's listening on a HTTPS endpoint there. Right. Okay. So if I jump back to the presentation. Okay, so I think that's all I was wanting to show you there. Right. Okay. It's also my weather station does also have a Twitter account as well. It's just passed over 220,000 tweets. It's been running for about 8 years. Right. Okay. Let's move on. Okay, so that was the designer authoring side. So now I'm going to move more onto the App Connect Enterprise V12 that we've just released, and go through some parts of the update there, what we've done there. So with App Connect Designer, which we've just shown, it's very web UI based, and you can see here it's all done through the web. That's where you put your flows together. That's where you generate your bars. You can export bars from there and deploy them. It's the UI is award-winning. It's configuration-based, model-driven tooling. Lots of these connectors are where the power really is. The connectors have all of the logic for you to be able to call out to all of those end systems. And then we have the Eclipse one. So this is our App Connect toolkit for ACE V12. This enables you to get right down to sort of like the bit level. So whereas the web one is much more, or App Connect Designer is much more focused on connectors and connecting to web-based services, web-based applications like your Salesforces and Workday, for example. And the Eclipse one is it's an evolution of what we've been doing for the past 20 years, where you've got messages maybe coming off queues still, you've got binary messages that you need to map, so very compact models that you want to unpack and then process, and the ability really to do more or less anything you want. I mean, we have customers running the world. They run like all the banks use us. All the financial institutions, planes, airports, anything you can think of. Every time you put your card in the hole in the wall, it uses ACE under the covers. So it uses this, and so it's very you can do anything with it. But with Designer, you can chop and change. You can create bar files in App Connect Designer that you can run directly on ACE. You can create callable flows that you can call between hybrid clouds, between clouds. So it's all very interchangeable. It's all very interchangeable. So what have we done for 12? So for 12, we're starting to make the UI look a lot more like the designer authoring. You can see here the icons are becoming similar. We've beefed up our tutorials and our test framework. We've improved as well. Okay. There's a lot of information out there now. We encourage the development teams to create blogs and articles, and they get published all the time. I'll show you, in fact, actually, I think I've still got that one up, so I can probably just jump to that. So in the integration community here, you can see, I mean, I actually published a blog yesterday. So this is one that I published yesterday. So you can go into these blogs and they give you information on how to set these things up. We have lots of YouTube videos that the team put together, you know, lots of discussions. So if people need help, they can post here. A lot of library of previous articles from the past years. You can just jump straight into these, and you know, it's a very active community, so it's got, you know, good responses there. So if you ever got any problems, you can just jump to that, and that's like a one-stop shop. Okay. The way that you configure your nodes or integration servers in version 12 is similar to version 11. Everything's done with a node or server conf YAML. So we have a base server conf YAML, and then you can generate an override file. So these overrides can be for, say, production or development or pre-prod or whatever environment you want. So you can always keep the integration server. You can very easily create integration servers with certain personalities, I guess, you know, using these server conf YAML files. So all you need to do is just fire up the integration server and say, here's my override file, and that will set up your IS or your node. And this is what I mentioned earlier on. So the upgraded and restyled toolkit. So we spent a bit of time here just changing the icons. Some people like them, some people don't. But it's trying to make it look a bit more modern, you know, and it's still Eclipse based. But we have a new flow exerciser and message assembly editor. So we have done some improvements there, and it's based on the latest version of Eclipse. Yeah, new key concepts such as IS and iNodes, all the stuff that you recognize. So integration servers are still there, policy documents, REST APIs we've improved. So we support OpenAPI v3 now, and you have the ability to create message flows, subflows, and so on, but all nicely in a tutorial style of way. Excuse me. Here's our tutorial gallery. So again, it looks again very similar to the way that the direction we've gone with our designer authoring and cloud-based offerings, trying to, and this is something that's happening across the whole of the IBM portfolio. In our cloud pack for integration, we have this common look and feel. And so the idea is that if you use one of the products, then you instantly know how to get home, how to get to the dashboards, how to get to your accounts, that sort of thing. It's all there. And the tutorial symbol is always the same. So you know, right, I'm in this world, a little different, but here's where the tutorials are. And so that's what we're trying to do there. I've got over 100 product tutorials now, so we just keep adding them. All the flows that worked previously, all the way back to version 5, are still will still work. So you'll be able to port them, migrate them quite easily. This, you can see, is now very similar to what we had in designer authoring, the ability to create an OpenAPI v3 to start from scratch. And then you can import JSON or YAML OpenAPI v3. You can then export that for your customers. So your own, when you've created your flow, your own customers can then take your OpenAPI and know exactly how to call your server. So we have common, we have like a common visualization of this between all of our products now, where we actually use common code and common ACE dashboard code under the covers to make this the same. I mean, if you're using the same code, it's going to look the same. So I'll move on. So here's your OpenAPI v3. So an example of using that. You can, once you've created your REST API, you can then edit the document, make and save changes. It won't allow you to save if there's errors, so you need to make sure everything's valid. And then when you save, that will give you your API front door, and you can then go and also give you the example sample flows that you can then go and flesh out. You can then start putting your real live flows in there. Okay. Another thing we've built in is JSON parsing validation. So this is something we didn't have. So this is new. So you can now validate JSON coming in. So we were very good with XML, which is where we've been for a long time. And so we're now starting to add support for JSON. We actually run Node.js in the ACE engine as well. So that is something that we can fire up if we need to. No, it's not there all the time. So we support the JSON schema draft 4.5 and the Open API specifications v2, so the Swagger, and v3, which is the new one. It's, well, I say new one, it's been a few years now, but more and more people are starting to move towards the v3. A few years back, everybody was using Swagger v2. Now more and more are moving across. So yeah, so very easy to sort of parse the JSON, validate it, make sure it's valid. If it's not, we would throw an exception. And if it is valid, then we could serialize it, output it, on it goes down its journey down the flow. This is the ACE 12 web user interface, very similar to what we have in Designer 2. We like I said, we embed effectively the same code and same libraries, so you can see when we and I'll show a demo of this in a bit. When you jump to the dashboard, the ACE dashboard within CP4I is effectively our designer under the covers. Once you get to the integration server part, like here, the test server, all that code's the same, and so you can see the same things appearing in your dashboards. And we're putting more and more features and function into this all the time. So this is something that we're extending as a way of very easily looking to see what the IS is doing. So like record and replay, for example, and an admin log as well. So we've got an admin log that we're now exposing there too. So yep, this is going through basically what I just mentioned there. You can create separate credentials for when deploying to these. So you can secure it. So you can have an admin user and like an operator user or a viewer. So you can restrict what people can do or see on each of these servers. Yeah, and the dashboard has its own configuration files as well that live in the work directory. So you can configure the App Connect dashboard for your own uses. And it's a very lightweight Node.js application that runs as a separate process within the ACE server. And you can see here, so we can see a node. If you then drill into that node, you can see the servers, and then you drill into those servers and you can see all your integrations that are running. Whenever you use the UI, we've now got a log that you can turn on. And so this records administrative actions. So who's been doing what. So this is something that obviously customers have been asking for a while, actually. And so we finally got round to doing this. And so it's gives you that way of seeing what's been going on your integration servers. And you can see here an example of it. So people, it's all REST requests under the covers now. So whenever you interact with the admin server, it's effectively interacting with the REST admin server. And that's what you can see here. So you can see all the calls that are being made, by who, with what authorizing role, and when all of these things took place. And this can all be exported as well. Okay, so the flow exerciser. So this is something that we've improved a lot. So the ability to individually test a flow, and you can record a flow as well. So you can send a message through and see, like you see this little envelope here. You can zoom in at any single point to see what the message tree, the whole of the message assembly looks like at that point. So this uses a running integration server that runs inside your toolkit. The message comes in, And as it works its way along, you can save off these message flow assemblies as a unit test, and then reuse that. And then you can run that unit test after every build, for example. So this is getting us more towards that point where we want to be able to create bar files that can be deployed straight away in integration servers. So actually baking, this will be a way of being able to take this bar file and then bake it within an integration server image, which you can then fire up and start within seconds. And unit testing that flow was part of being able to get that end-to-end working. Okay. So test-driven development. I mean, this is what, again, customers have been asking for a long time. So using JUnit 5 here, the ability to create a JUnit dynamically within the UI, and then to export them and then to be able to run them. So being able to test individual flow nodes, subflows, entire message flows, or even the entire integration server via this framework, all built in, all the ability to be able to create that test case and to create them very, very quickly is something that customers have been asking for a long time. So that's why we've done this. There's also an API for this as well. So you can, if you want, write a program that actually drives the underlying engine that this TDD is on top of. And so you could create, for example, 1,000 unit tests in just a few seconds, with slight variations on input, and then run them all. So it's very, very, very clever. It's been built. It's been built properly. It's been architected properly. So it does have, it's very function rich, I think's the word. So yeah, Node Spy allows you to see or specify the terminals to be invoked, and access the output afterwards, so you can check. So a bit like if you know Node, the ability to sort of have fakes and stubs and spies, all of that is all here, and you can then run it as JUnits and count things and inspect parts. Yeah, even substitute a node out and put another node in. So to say, I always want this, I don't want this to call my live system. I want it to always return true. I've managed to contact Workday or whatever, or I've managed to publish the event here. So we don't want to call Kafka live in our unit test. So let's stub out this so that we don't do that. So that's all there now. Recorded messages. So this is something that Gabriel and our team spends a lot of time doing. So you can see him there. And so you can use our new IBM int command. So this is the replacement for the MQSI apply bar override sort of command that we used to have. That's all the MQSI commands that we used to have. We now have these IBM int commands. They work with like the verb and the noun. So what you want to do, what you want to do that on. So here, for example, this is generating those test cases that I mentioned earlier on. So you can generate tests using existing message flows and provide YAML. Everything's driven by YAML now. So we have small bits of YAML to drive everything. So you can see here that this found 7,500 recorded messages in this directory, recorded messages, and then using this IBM int generate tests, 5,600 test cases were written. And so they could be then run every single time to make sure that if anybody else altered the flow, the flow always gave the right answer. Okay. Whoops. You can connect the toolkit directly to GitHub now. So this is a way of being able to store your projects, your integration server projects, and you can just store them directly in Git. So as you are updating flows, you can store them in Git and then retrieve them from Git. So we've got much more tighter integration there. We've got a toolkit tutorial there to help guide you through setting that up. And you can share your project. Yeah, so once you've created this project, you can then share that project with GitHub, and then obviously other people can then work on that too. And you can see here, this is Ben's GitHub repo where he's got an ACE repository there, and he's pulling that down. Yeah, I touched on this earlier. So the IBM int commands, so the IBM integration. So this is the new set of commands that we have, and you can see there, you know, what you can do. You can create, delete, start, apply, compile, deploy, generate. So all of those MQSI commands that you had previously, we're consolidating them all. We're bringing them all together with a common language. So once you've understood how to, you know, what you want to do, you want to create a server, delete a server, do you want to apply some setting, you can, you know, that's the verb, and then you've got the noun of the thing you want to do that on. And so you can see here, it's all fully help, and you know, a lot of we found a lot of efficiencies as we've been doing this as well. So we've been re-architecting and rewriting the pieces at a lower level, so things are faster. But our main driving force for this was really to push to container technologies like OpenShift and Docker, and to bring ACE into that Docker world, into that into that container space. Okay, so these next 3 slides are all around how you can get your message flow source effectively to be deployed to your bar files and to be deployed. So this is source to server classic. So this is what we've been doing for years and years and years. You know, we've got our source repository, maybe CVS, maybe in Eclipse, Git, or whatever. But that then had a lot of source files which we would build. And so a long time ago, we would compile to CMF, to the compiled message flow, into the bar file. You could then push that bar file to some sort of asset repository where you would store it. And then when you wanted to deploy that in your pipeline, you would pull that down, and then that will get deployed 90% of the time into a VM or an LPAR, where you'd have your server running live in production or pre-prod. So that would be there. Relatively high test costs, flows built, manually tested. You know, I mean, this has not been ideal, but it works. You know, and it's what a lot of customers are doing at the moment. So if we move on to today, our current view, it's very similar, but we've now got config separated out. So these triangle configs, and this is simplifying. It's those bar file overrides. It's simplifying the flow. You don't need to have all of the environment specific configuration in the bar file, in the flow. You can apply it using apply bar overrides. You can create the bar using Ant, using MQSI create bar. So this was work that we did for V10 really. So this is going back still a few years, but this is like the V10 work. And what that enables you to do is to be able to take again from your source repository, create a bar dynamically, but then apply the config separately. So you can test it here and then apply the config and then deploy, say, to production or test. So very similar to the previous, but now you have that multiple environments, multiple environments that you can use. And then we've now taken that one step further. So calling this modernizer, or sort of like Docker way, sort of container way. So again, very similar over here. Source repository comes out, you build everything. You then get a Docker build this time. So rather than building the bar, you're actually building the bar and creating a work directory effectively. So you've now got this working directory, which is effectively your bar file unzipped. And that can be source files in the vast majority of cases. So they don't necessarily need to be compiled anymore. So that can be source. And then we add the config right at the end. So we build the image with the working directory, add the config with kubectl secrets, so that's running on your K8 system. You've got those secrets running on your K8 system. And then when the bar gets deployed, it pulls in those secrets. So the config is has moved much more into your actual K8 running environment. That's where now you're able to store your configurations. They can be stored now within your Red Hat OpenShift or your Azure or AWS or wherever as secrets. And then each one of your containers, when that container is the same, but it's using the different configuration that's mounted in to that mounted into that container. So it can use that. So it's a nice separation of being able to separate your configuration out and have that on the systems that you want, and then you just deploy your ACE image that you've generated with your working directory, which again is effectively a bar or multiple bars unzipped, and that all runs there on your server. So you can improve even further. So this is where we get into this so baking and frying, where you've baked in all of your bar file, all of your configuration. That's one way of doing this in your container. So you can basically take all of your source and bake it all in to that container and then fire it up, and it's self-contained, it just works. Or you can fry it. So this is where you effectively fire up a container, which is effectively an ACE container, and it pulls in a bar, it pulls in various configuration and unzips it itself. So the baking is obviously much faster because it's all there, all in the container, and it's only that bar file layer at the top which changes. So it fires up really quickly because all of the ACE container will be common because of the way that the Docker layers work. And so that's very quick, whereas the frying can be a bit slower because basically it's having to do work to pull in all of the configurations from various places to be able to set up the integration server. And I can show a quick demo of that in a minute where we're frying. Right, okay, so this is showing the run directory. So this is the working directory again of your integration server. So effectively, it's everything just unzipped. You've got server level properties, application level properties. This is how, in V11, this is where everything was. Now we're just unzipping all of that. So this is sort of showing sort of like, where we've come from. So it's unzip and go, which we've been pushing for a while, well, since version 11, definitely. So version 10 obviously was all in registries and things like that. Now we have everything in all the configuration in that YAML file, and then all of the actual runtime itself is just in a directory, just unzipped. And then it's the integration server itself can dynamically run it itself. So yeah, so we've got the configuration there in the workdir, and then in the rundir, that's where we have effectively the bar file. And then we have our server conf overrides in here, any logging and any additional config as well. But it's all in a directory that you can just unzip and go anywhere you want. So very easy to back up your server configuration and runtime. Right, so this is I'll just go back a slide there. So this is effectively a single slide on migration. So how would you do migration? So if you're moving from V10, where you have a system very similar to this, you have your applications, you have your MQSI scripts to create your registries and your integration servers. How do you move from this? So the first thing you would do is you would install ACE version 11 or 12. You would then back up your broker using MQSI backup broker, and this creates a zip file for you. And then you would extract those components, which effectively gives you your work directory, your run directory. So that will give you things like your node config, your policies, your server conf, and then all of your applications, libraries, that sort of thing, and all there. And if you wanted to, you could have a standalone server, so you just have that integration server running on its own without the node, and then you just branch your code to a V12 branch. So if you had a V10 branch, you then branch it to your V12, And that's effectively how you do a migration from V10. So we do have a path to be able to get you to the new world. And then once you've done that, so just so that those two disappear, and then from V12, then you can just go directly to your run directory. So it's just the source going straight through all the time. And then you would back up that server conf YAML and you back up that runtime directory, but you no longer require any of these scripts or any of these other pieces, because that's all been baked into the server conf YAML. And then yeah, you uninstall. So there's four. These are four and migration scenarios that you could have. You could extract a whole V10 into V12. Extract just an individual server maybe. So you don't need to do a big bang. Big bangs are always bad. So if you wanted to, you could just take an individual server and just do that if you wanted. You could extract ACE v11 is very easy because they're very, very similar infrastructure. So they could just port straight across. But you could still, if you wanted to, from an ACE v11, just take an individual server and run that as an ACE v12 server. And then once you have these as individual servers, it makes it much easier to then containerize them and run them separately and to be able to scale them and so on. Yeah, one of the things we're trying to move away from is this concept of default application. So default application is a bit of an overhang from, well, all the way back in version 7, version 6, really, when we didn't really have any other behavior. You effectively had an application that you would deploy and everything was shared. Everything was in that one place. We then created applications and libraries in V8 and V9. And so we try to enforce an isolation. We try to enforce, libraries that would be used by individual apps. And that allowed you to have, the same library several times with different names and being used in different places. And that was good. That helped provide that isolation. And then we moved to V10, where we introduced shared libraries. So rather than just the structure changing, it now actually had a runtime consequence as well. You can have a shared library that can be used in multiple applications, and you can update that shared library, and then the applications or libraries would then pick up on that shared library. But through all of this, we've had this concept of this default application, which is very similar to this forced sharing project that we've got, had right at the start. And what we're trying to say is, try and move away from this default application, because it really doesn't fit in with this nice shared library application, shared or isolation concept that we currently have. The default application just sort of sits there. It doesn't get updated as frequently as the apps and libraries. So you can have side effects during operations. You can stop and start things, and you could have side effects because a change hasn't taken effect, for example, because you've changed this app, and so it's taken effect here, but it's not taken effect here until, say, it's been stopped and started again, and then it will take effect. So really, rather than it's a bit like static and dynamic, we really want to try and stick with applications, shared libraries and try and move away from the default application at that very, very top level. Okay. Yep, another piece of technology we have, or which we plug into, is the IBM Cloud Transformation Advisor. So what this does is it's an application that you can install, and it will discover dependencies on your system, and then give you an assessment on how to port that maybe to the new world. So how to port to the cloud packs, how to port to container environments, things like that. So that's what this is for. So this is a good thing to run if you're still running those VMs and you want to see what sort of impact or how hard it would be for you to move that system onto the cloud. Okay, oops, let's go back. This was just our swoosh, our version swoosh. So we haven't got version 12 on here yet. So version 12 went out at the start of this year, and this goes all the way up to the end of 2020, but we're now at 12.020, so we've changed our versioning strategy slightly. So it's not, we're still doing fixed packs, but we're also using now the major minor version. This is the major version, and the mod release, that's it. So it's the mod release version that we're using more. So this is for our fixes, for say security fixes, things like that. This is more for new function. So you can see here, this is all the work that we did here for V11 and how we added this function in to these fixed packs. Now we're going to have these like mod packs. So the number's going to be here instead. And so it's going to be 12.01, 12.02, 12.03, but then each one of those will have its own fixes. So 12.01.1, 12.01.2, 12.01.3, that sort of thing. Because security is becoming a major driving force between for us to get out these additional updates, because the amount of vulnerabilities that people are finding all the time now in dependencies is going higher and higher and higher. So we're having to push out, and everybody, the whole industry is having to push out very, very quickly fixes when vulnerabilities are found. And so that's one of the reasons why we keep the fix packs going, the mostly security fixes, and then we have the mod packs for the function. So that's a change that you'll see for the version 12 swoosh when we get round to that. Right, so nearly at 11:30. This was a slide all about, so I have not flipped on there. So this is a slide about the App Connect operator. So the App Connect operator is effectively what we run in our Red Hat container environment. But the core of that is the integration server, is the ACE integration server. You know, that's the thing that is the runtime engine. App Connect Designer authoring is the thing that can produce flows for that engine. We can also produce flows using our toolkit. So the toolkit is still there. So that this toolkit here can still obviously create flows as well. But we also have the new designer flow as well. But the output of all of these are bar files. So I can quickly show you that. So one of the things you can do is export a bar, and then you can run that bar on your ACE, you know, and on your ACE runtime. So here's for example, here's two servers that I've got running at the moment, and I can dive into these. I can see I've got a customer database v1, so that was this customer database application here running. We can drill inside that, and we can again test this. So we can try it out within here. Oops. And we can see that working. There we go, it's worked there. Or we can just call it direct in the browser. I mean, this is live on the web, so you can just call that. So that application is just running there as a bar file within that container Red Hat environment. So I feel like I've rushed through a huge amount. I mean, there's so much more that we've been developing over the past year or so. But I've tried to sort of give a very high level overview of a lot of the pieces that we've been putting together, and the focus very much is on usability and containerization as well. So you can see here's the 3 integration servers that I have running in this Red Hat system, and I can dive into them, and you know, you can see the routes and things. I mean, this is a whole different presentation now, but yeah, that's all I had. So Melvin, I don't know, I don't think any questions have come through. I feel like I've gone a million miles an hour, but
thank you very much, Dom. No, I don't see any questions coming through.
okay.
So please send your feedback, session 1AB. And thank you very much, Dom.
Okay, no problem.
I will see you tomorrow.
Yeah, same time tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to go a bit more into the App Connect operator. So it's going to be a lot more container based. So this was a lot more about the products. that's going to be a lot more about the containers and the pods and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.